Right. Well, okay. Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year to you all. And just before we go, can I ask you all please to either switch your mobiles up or put them on silent? Thank you. Going to the agendas then, anybody have any apologies from anybody?
I don't have any apologies, Chair.
Late items to be introduced by the Chair. Well, I don't have any. Other than the fact that I can tell you the one of the applications for I think Mickleover has been withdrawn, so we've only got 2 to deal with tonight. Has anybody got any declarations of interest? No? Minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of November.
Move those, Chair.
Thank you. Minutes of the Conservation Area Advisory Committee, which was held on 15th of October.
Can we note those, Chair?
Thank you very much. Okay, then we'll go to item 6, which is appeals decisions. I think Ian's going to tell us if there's anything.
Yeah, good evening, Chair. It's Ian Woodhead, Development Control Manager. Just the one item to talk about tonight, Chair. It's 149 Almond Street. You may recall this came to committee last year. Application for a house in multiple occupation. The application was amended during its life, negotiations with the agent. It was originally for a 10-person HIMO, scaled down to an 8-person one to accommodate more communal space at ground floor level. And they also, if you may recall, gave a bit of garden space at the rear and some off-street car parking. It was a positive recommendation before you. Members had a good debate about it. I think the other Councillor Khan made representations also at the meeting. It was refused on the grounds of the impact on the character of the wider area in terms of the increased comings and goings, etc. from the proposal. Went to appeal. The inspector felt that, given the nature of the area, its character, the nature of existing uses in the area, felt that it wouldn't be injurious to the comings and the amenities of neighbours by virtue of increased comings and goings, given the fallback position that could be in play with a 6-person HMO and a large family dwelling, and also agreed with our colleagues in Highways about the acceptability of the proposal in terms of the comings and goings of traffic. So the appeal was allowed with 5 conditions, and it's worth a review of that decision letter, because the inspector, she includes some fairly key points that will come up with other HMO applications. So happy to take any questions, Chair. Many thanks.
Thank you, Ian. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, Chair. Thank you. Just one. Did we have any costs against us, Ian? That was my only question. Thank you, Chair.
No, Councillor Khan. An application wasn't made in this case, and whether it's good that there wasn't an application, but it was the debate was a fairly thorough one at committee, and it was based on a more of a qualitative judgment based on rather than technical analysis. So whether one would have been fruitful anyway, I don't know, but no, none was made in this case, Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. If there's nothing else, then we'll move on to the item 7 applications to be considered tonight, and I believe the first one is 93 Stepping Lane, and is Stephen to tell us about that?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is Stephen Bates, Senior Planning Officer. Firstly, there are 2 matters of housekeeping to bring to members' attention regarding this report. Firstly, paragraph 7.1, the report erroneously states that the proposal comprises the conversion of the former dwelling, which is already operating lawfully as a HMO. This is unfortunately incorrect. The building is currently a vacant mid-terraced 3-bedroom dwelling. And has recently been on the market. Secondly, members will have received a copy of a presentation prepared by the applicant in support of the proposal. and amongst other matters, this presentation emphasises the high standard of finish of the accommodation and sets out the target market of tenants, those being for professionals, university staff and postgraduates. So this site comprises a traditional mid-terrace dwelling with a two-storey rear outrigger and a large outbuilding in the rear garden. The site is surrounded by other terraced residential properties, and there's a modern small estate to the rear. The current HMO register indicates that there are 8 other properties along Stepping Lane that are or have been in multiple use. This proposal seeks permission for the conversion of this single dwelling to a sui generis large 7-bedroom HMO. And there are also proposed external works, and they include the erection of a small rear single-storey flat roof extension, the creation of a rear full-width flat-roofed dormer, the installation of 2 roof lights to the front elevation, provision of bin store in the rear garden, and the use of the existing rear outbuilding for bicycle storage. There are various internal works, and they would result in the creation of 4 ensuite bedrooms, 3 studio flats, all of which have a kitchenette area, and a communal kitchen living area on the ground floor with access to the rear garden. This application has been called into committee by Councillor Adrian Pegg, who has objected, stating that he did not believe the application is appropriate for the area and he has grave concerns about car parking. However, no representations of any sort have been received from local residents. So, looking at the application, as members will be aware, the NPPF states that the government's objective is to significantly boost the supply of homes and that a sufficient amount and variety of land should come forward to address the needs of groups with special and specific housing needs. Officers consider that this proposal will increase the variety and amount of housing delivery in accordance with both the NPPF and with Core Strategy Policy CP6, and consequently there should be no planning policy objections to this proposal. The proposed conversion would provide satisfactory communal space, and the internal layout would ensure that all the bedrooms have full windows and achieve the required minimum size standard, and no objections have been raised by the Council's Housing Standards team. The proposed external rear extensions and dormer would not be visible from Stepping Lane, and their impact on public views would be minor. Both extensions would use either materials or colour scheme to match the existing, and as such should not have any adverse visual impact on the surrounding area. The site is located in an accessible and sustainable location, being approximately 400 metres walking distance from both shops and public transport routes along Ashbourne Road. Cycle parking is also proposed within the site. The Highway Authority raised no objections, and they conclude that any additional residents would be unlikely to lead to an unacceptable impact on highway safety. I am aware that Councillor Kerr is likely to seek changes to the recommended conditions relating to cycle parking and the need for a travel plan, and I'm happy to agree to those amendments. I'm also happy to agree a condition requiring details of recycling and waste to be approved. As I mentioned, no local residents have raised any objections, either relating to parking or to the proposed HMO having a detrimental impact on the character of the surrounding area. Now, I appreciate that members have previously raised concerns regarding the intensification of use of properties and the impact of HMOs on the character of the surrounding area. However, members should be aware that each application must be considered on its own merits, and in this instance, a critical consideration is that the property could lawfully be used as a 6-person HMO. And as such, any judgment on the impact of the character of the area must be confined to how much extra impact one additional occupier would make. There are already 8 properties on the HMO register along Stepping Lane, such that it might be argued that the proposed use is consistent with the character of the surrounding area, which does not purely comprise family housing, but already includes an element of transient and student populations. If significant evidence is not put forward to justify a refusal on the grounds of the detrimental impact on the wider character of the area, then any subsequent appeal is likely to be successful, as was the case at 149 Almond Street, which you've just heard about the appeal decision. So in conclusion, The proposed HMO would increase the variety and amount of housing delivery. Hence, we consider the proposal is acceptable in principle. The proposal meets all the council's housing standards. A satisfactory quality of living accommodation can be provided. The proposed extensions would not have any adverse visual impact, and it is considered that the proposal would not cause any overriding adverse impact on either highway or neighbour amenity, and consequently the proposal would comply with the provisions of the MPPF and with the key core strategy policies. The recommendation is for approval with any additional conditions that members consider are suitable, for example to address cycle parking, travel plans and waste recycling. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Stephen. Anybody from Highways like to add anything?
I take it Mr. Thorne is not here, is he?
I've just unmuted myself.
I beg your pardon, Christopher. I'll leave it to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Nothing really to add, I'm afraid. As has already been stated, the MPPF states that we can't ask for refusal if the proposals are not going to be constitute a highway safety issue. So, and we don't believe they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I believe we have a speaker on this, Adrian Pagg.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Happy New Year, everybody. In this area, there are already too many houses of multiple occupancy. Converting this property for sui generis use will add to the already overcrowded area. Therefore, I'm compelled to oppose yet another house of multiple occupancy. On-street parking is a premium on Stepping Lane. I have noted that the committee report acknowledges this. With no provision for off-street parking and no facilities for off-street parking, any further cars parked on the street would exacerbate an already serious problem. Whilst the rooms may be within standard, I'm greatly concerned about the number of occupants that would be cramped in this property and the impact this would have on the street and neighbourhood. Precedents have been set with refusal of similar planning applications in the area, and therefore I urge the committee to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Can we get this off the screen there? Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of things from me before I open it up to the committee. As Stephen said in his presentation, each application should be looked at on its own merit, and the fact that we may have lost an appeal or have lost an appeal in Almond Street, a completely different area to what this is, should influence us in any way in our decision making, and we shouldn't be afraid of sort of sending something before an appeals committee. So with that said, does anybody want to make any comments?
Yes, please, Chair.
Chair. I have sent a message over.
Yeah, sorry, I've just seen it. Yeah, we've got, is it Mike first?
Before me.
Sorry, Lucy's first, I believe.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, Mr. Bate mentioned my name earlier because I had asked for a couple of points to be clarified. One is about the existing proposed condition about cycle parking, which says that the area for cycle parking should not be used for anything except cycle parking, which is fine, except they could just lock the building and not allow anybody to use it at all. So we need to just tweak the standard cycle parking conditions to make sure that it's actually available for cycle parking at all times, not that it's just been locked away and not used for something else. And I'm sure officers can deal with that as a tweak, or certainly I hope they can. The other 2 points I raised were about waste management and a travel plan. And we've had this discussion before in that if this were a 6-bed HIMO, which it could become without any planning approval changes, they would need to have the extension approved, I think one of them. then we would have no say over giving any advice about bus journeys, cycle routes, or anything else like the shortage of car parking in the area. Whereas if we have a travel plan, which we could condition, then we would be able to give people guidance and expect the operator of the building to provide such guidance. And I believe that we could also do a similar requirement to provide advice on waste management. And where we have buildings where you're getting a studio unit or you're getting a bed space, then you're likely to have a much higher turnover of people in that area, and keeping up with how you're supposed to do recycling in this area that you just moved to may be a problem. So to put in a condition about how to manage your waste, how to recycle in Derby, would also be something that we would be able to, I believe, condition in this area. Chair, I was pleased about the presentation that they sent us and the aspirations here for a higher standard of HIMO. And I think that if we are able to encourage the expectation of a high standard of house in multiple occupation, then that may be able to push up the standard of other properties in that area. So I'm supportive of this going through, because it will give us more control to have gone through planning than to have just let it change its use regardless. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lucy. Yes, I agree with you that we should be asking developers to make sure that the sort of incoming tenants are aware of bus routes and recycling, and in general to be aware of what's available to them. Next speaker is, I believe, Paul Pegg.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting to listen to Councillor Kerr with regards to the recycling. We've been trying for years to get people to recycle correctly in that area, putting leaflets out, speaking to landlords and everything else. It's all right for this for a couple of weeks, and then it just doesn't do anything. Bins are left on the streets and everything else, and that's just to do with recycling. But my concern is, again, the reason there's been no objections from local residents is because either side of that property are HMOs. And it's just ridiculous. At night, you cannot get up that road. Police have been called on more than one occasion to step in lane because of the traffic can't get either way. Because once they get to the middle, there's nowhere for them to park up to a passing space. And it's happened on more than one occasion that the police have called. I don't believe that any HMO that we give permission for is going to turn around and say you cannot use a vehicle. That is just never going to happen, because all the landlords are interested in is the money that they're going to make out of it. There's far too many of these in that area. They're not for business people, they're for students. And we're constantly getting problems in that area with antisocial behaviour and so on and so forth. I've got it now. I've got an email today over antisocial behaviour from somebody going out, sitting in the car, revving it up and smoking from an HMO. And it's just absolutely ridiculous why they just want to flood that area of Derby with HMOs. It's ridiculous. And we can't take any more. The area cannot take any more. It is abundantly clear. The roads are saturated in that area. We, as a council, we're even having to look at putting smaller dust carts, bin wagons in the area so they can get up and down the streets because of the amount of traffic. And it's creating major issues. And I certainly won't be voting for it. And we've just got to stop it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. I believe the next speaker is Councillor Ross McChrystal.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've listened to Councillor Pegg and I've listened to Councillor Pegg. I'm inclined to agree with both Councillor Peggs that this HIMO's again unacceptable. The area is clearly saturated with HMOs. Stepping lane, notoriously difficult for car parking, and I agree with Councillor Paul Pegg. I know personally, having driven up there, issues with double parking along the road. We talk about recycling, but let's talk about refuse collection generally. Where are these folks going to be storing their bins? How much waste is going to be produced by a household? And let's remember, by this household, but let's remember, this is a building that was built with the purpose of having 3 bedrooms. And now we're talking about converting it into a property that can contain effectively 7 separate households. It's really, as far as I'm concerned, an unacceptable use of a terraced house. And you know, speaking almost off the record, to me, this development, it feels greedy. It feels greedy. It feels greedy by the person that's made this application to want to develop this site into what only can be considered to be absolute overuse. And I think also it's absolutely unrealistic that by turning this property into a property that's going to contain 7 separate individuals, potentially plus partners, we're going to be injecting at least 7 plus cars further onto an already congested area. So for that reason, I'm going to struggle to support this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ross. Anybody else? If not, would somebody like to move it to vote?
I'm happy to move it, Chair, with the additional conditions that I've mentioned.
Chair, sorry, can I just come in and just seek clarification from Stephen? Sorry, it's Stephen T still here. It was just mentioned about that the property potentially could have 7 individuals plus. I think I'm just seeking clarification from Stephen Bate that it's limited to 7 people or not.
Yes, Chairman, I think there's a condition which would require each bedroom only to be used on an individual basis, so we can control the numbers to ensure that they're not increased beyond that 7.
I'd just like to add, it's impossible to please, though, isn't it? And we can't expect these people to be to remain single.
Right. Well, I appreciate that, but as long as we're able to put this condition and also what Lucy is asking for, so with that in mind, would that be okay then, Stephen, from a legal point of view?
Yes, that's fine. Sorry, I keep trying to get my video on. It keeps refusing to come on. Yeah, there we are, I think. Yeah, that would be okay, Chair. That would be fine. I mean, I would probably just add that I think, as Stephen has pointed out, it's a question of whether changing from 6 individuals to 7 individuals is going to be have a significant impact as sufficient to warrant refusal. I think Lucy has sort of actually focused in on the main points that you've got more control. So if where you're granting planning permission in this case, whereas they could actually operate it as a 6-person house without that control. So I think Lucy made some very strong points in relation to that. And the other point I just also highlight is that whilst this application's got to be considered on its own merits, I think sort of you've got to take due note of sort of any decisions by the inspectorate relating to sort of similar properties, and we've obviously had the recent appeal decision, and though the points made by the inspector, as highlighted by Stephen in his report, are very pertinent to your consideration of this matter tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, I agree with you. The sort of, and with Lucy in terms of what we can and what we can't do. And the other thing, of course, we have to sort of be mindful and consider is the fact that we haven't actually had people objecting to it from the public or roundabout. Yes, I appreciate that Councillor Adrian Pegg has come in and stated his opposition to it. But we have to take these things into consideration. So, with all this in mind, can we now move to a vote?
Chair, I'm happy to move it.
Anybody second it?
I'll second that, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Stephen Mason is it who will be doing the...
Yep, it is, Chair, thank you.
When you're ready, Stephen.
Okay, Councillor Bettany, please.
I confirm my presence and I've listened to the presentation and debate and I vote in favour of the application.
Thank you, Councillor Bettany. Councillor Kerr, please.
I'm presuming that we've put the additional conditions into that as well.
Yeah. Yes, Lucy.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to confirm that. And I can confirm my presence and have listened to the presentation and debate, and I vote in favour.
In favour, thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Carr, please.
I confirm my presence and have listened to the presentation and debate, and I vote in favour.
In favour, thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Hassel, please.
I confirm my presence and have listened to the presentation and debate, and I vote in favour.
In favour, thank you, Councillor Hassel. Councillor Nawaz, please.
Councillor Nawaz, are you there?
Chair, I'll come back to Councillor Nawaz.
Okay.
Councillor McChrystal, please.
Yes, I confirm my presence and I've listened to the presentation debate. I vote against.
Against, thank you, Councillor McChrystal. Councillor Pearce, please.
I confirm my presence and I've listened to the presentation and debate and I vote in favour.
In favour, thank you, Councillor Pearce. Councillor Paul Pegg, please.
I confirm my presence and I've listened to the presentation and debate. I vote against.
Against, thank you, Councillor Pegg. Councillor West, please.
Thanks, Stephen. I confirm my presence and have listened to the presentation and debate. I vote against officer's recommendation.
Against, thank you, Councillor West. Chair, I'll just go back to Councillor Nawaz. Councillor Nawaz, please. No, I don't think we have him, Chair. Finally, yourself then, Chair. I think you're muted, Chair.
Yeah, sorry, I confirm my presence and have listened to the presentation and debate, and I vote in favour.
In favour, thank you, Chair. So I have in total 6 in favour and 3 against.
Thank you. That recommendation is therefore passed. Okay, moving on to the second part, which is the Backwell land development, and to tell us about this, I believe, is Ian Woodhead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Ian Woodhead, Development Control Manager. Just moving on to housekeeping items, Chair. Updates for the report were circulated yesterday. These include an additional condition to accompany those in Part 8.3 of your report. There's also a minor typo at the start of the final paragraph on page 45, which should read, "There are no overriding technical issues." Apologies for that typo. On to the main report, Chair. Members will recall the report for the hybrid application that was presented to the meeting 11 months ago and which addressed the overarching approach for the comprehensive development of the wider site. This application seeks reserved matters approval for the detailed elements of Phase 1, and it is important to note that this application is supported by separate discharge of condition applications as required under the hybrid permission to address certain technical issues. The principle of residential use and the parameters for the massing and layout of the buildings and spaces around the building have been established through the hybrid permission. The proposed building would be stepped up in height, up to 11 stories on the public square Victoria Street frontage, up to 7 stories on the Victoria Street frontage, and down to 4 stories on the Green Lane frontage. In terms of design evolution, the height on Victoria Street has been reduced by a story and on the rounded corner from earlier versions in the previous submission. Furthermore, The corner of Green Lane has been lowered for key views to the cathedral, with stepping down to address the smaller context and to form a transition in height and scale. Recesses have been introduced to divide the mass into sections to help the proportions and relationship with nearby buildings. The proposal seeks detailed approval for the erection of residential accommodation in a single building comprising 259 units. The proposed split of the residential accommodation is as follows: 136 one-bed units, 93 two-bed units and 30 studio units. In addition to the residential accommodation, the development provides 2 ground floor commercial units on Victoria Street and Green Lane, totalling some 630 square metres. This will provide active ground floor frontages, and a flexible use approval is required for a mix of main town centre uses. Alongside the 2 commercial units, a private lounge area, co-working space and gym for the sole use of residents will be provided on the ground floor of the building, and these will be located on the frontage facing the public square. The ground floor also accommodates the servicing, refuse areas and parking within the central courtyard. A total of 43 car parking spaces, including 3 disabled and 3 electric vehicle charging points, are provided in the central courtyard. 66 secure cycle parking spaces are provided in the northwest corner of the building and will be accessed from Beckwell Lane. Just reverting back to the electric vehicle charging points, Chair, it's important to note that given the evolution of electric vehicles, all non-electric vehicle parking spaces will be served with ducts to future-proof that element, so that charging can be incorporated in the future. The submission is a continuation of a thorough analysis and appreciation of this site and the wider site by the developer and a team of consultants working in partnership with colleagues. The components of the scheme essentially evolved during consideration of the hybrid application in response to heritage concerns and changing market conditions. In terms of the position and layout of the main rectangular element facing the proposed public square, the rationale for this approach is fivefold. Firstly, it is the best aspect for apartment daylighting, avoiding a predominant north-facing aspect. Secondly, it provides a more slender element facing Victoria Street. Thirdly, it allows at least 2 cores to serve all floors in an efficient manner. Fourthly, it reduces an undue overshadowing risk to the north. And finally, it provides a wider elevation and strong backdrop to the proposed public square. In urban design terms, the building also steps up away from Green Lane and turns a corner onto Victoria Street. This provides a gradual transition from the smaller built elements on Green Lane and pushes the height of the building away to the public square face. The elevations of the building have strong vertical emphasis, and there is no inconsistency in window spacings. The residential floors have consistent heights of around 2.85 metres and sits on the larger 4.2 metre ground floor plinth, which provides an active frontage to the public square, Green Lane and Victoria Street. This application has attracted strong support from both Marketing Derby and the Director of City Development and Growth, and no objections have been received from any third parties. The developer has engaged in positive discussions with other interested parties, and the supportive comments of the Derby Civic Society followed such a discussion. Overall, Chair, the city centre has and continues to experience significant reshaping as a result of COVID and other economic factors. The 2019 Retail and Centres Study highlights the way the city centre offer needs to change, and this has been accelerated by COVID. This proposal and subsequent phases would significantly contribute to rebuilding this important part of the city centre. Indeed, Duckworth Square and Beckwell have presented the Council and partners with a long-standing development conundrum, and this represents the most significant development opportunity for many years. Some reservations remain about the design of the proposal in relation to the setting of heritage assets, and Conservation Area Advisory Committee raised objections to the application. However, in line with the relevant policy tests in the framework, the public benefits of the scheme decisively outweigh any negative impacts, and I am satisfied that the design evolution has had full regard to the setting of various heritage assets across the wider city centre. Your report details the important delivery aspirations of the developer, together with the viability appraisal that has been fully scrutinised by the district valuer, the details of which are also summarised in your report. I am satisfied that, in this case, the planning gain associated with the redevelopment of this site is a decisive factor which enables us to dispense with the usual overage clause given the unique funding arrangements that are in place. Therefore, as your report states, there are no overriding technical issues with this application, and I consider that the range of conditions in the hybrid permission cover the majority of salient areas. Given the scope of that permission, I consider that minimal conditions are needed on this reserve matters approval. The proposed development accords with the development plan when read as a whole, and in accordance with our statutory duty, I would recommend to members that approval is given without delay. And there are no ward councillors to speak on this item, and back over to you, Chair. Many thanks.
Thank you, Ian. Well, two of the ward councillors actually are serving on this committee tonight, so they can probably have a comment if they want to. But would anybody from the committee like to comment on this?
Councillor Kerr's indicated she'd like to comment, Chair.
Yes, Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. I think the most interesting thing about this report and the comments that people have made is what they've not commented on. That apart from the Conservation Area Advisory Committee, there was very little scrutiny of the actual appearance of the new building. People talked about the massing of it and the location of it and the impact of the tall buildings, but there was very little comment about how it had changed from the previous version that we looked at in the outline stage. And I think in some ways that's sad, because we have aspirations for our tall buildings to be placemaking, to be unique, have a new character, and to be innovative. And I don't think that this building actually ticks any of those boxes. It's just acceptable. And I think that because it's acceptable, it's something that we will be able to accept. It will bring a new angle into the city, but I think that it could have done more. And I think that it's sad that it's not been able to do more, but I don't think all is lost. As members will know, we have an aspiration for the city to become zero carbon. We don't have a date yet, but it will certainly be within the lifetime of this building. So I hope that the construction of the building will enable things like solar panels to be installed on the roof in due course, although they're not being required at this stage. That there is potential for air sourced heat pumps to be used for a power source rather than gas, which will probably be where we are at the moment. And you know, there is scope for those sorts of changes. Indeed, it was good to hear that there will be the opportunity for all electric car charging within its scope. So for me, this is acceptable. It's not a great design. I think that we could be having things better, but we are where we are. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lucy. Ian, did you want to come back on anything that Lucy said?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's Ian Woodhead, Development Control Manager. I think what has been very positive with this scheme is when you do take time to look at the supporting information, there's a clear rationale as to why the building is how it is, and clearly the building has, you know, very strong elements in terms of how it presents itself to Green Lane. It turns the corner, it respects the scale of Green Lane, and it also, there's a clear rationale in the design and access statement, and it clearly includes previous attempts and solutions as to where to accommodate taller elements on the wider site, and things like the sun path analysis, and also the way that the building has to function internally. All these elements go into the mix, and you know, sometimes I do think that we are, you know, we do strive for exemplar design, and I think in this case we have got a design which it works well with the public square in terms of the layout of the building, the scale of the building, and the analysis of its surrounding, its context, and whilst there are elements that could be improved, Councillor Kerr has mentioned elements, and we've had an email discussion tonight before the meeting about them. But this building does have strong component parts. It's got strong vertical emphasis. It draws on themes from other parts of the city centre. It attempts to pay respect and lessen impact on heritage assets, which the previous submission clearly did have an impact, and hence why there was a rethink, and the developer and the team went back to the drawing board to look at the solution in response to those comments and concerns. They approached people like the Derby Civic Society, and so there has been a positive engagement with other parties. Clearly, issues such as solar panels and other internal building measures can be included in future, together with, as mentioned, the electric vehicle charging points. But I think the key thing for this and the key element for me is that we have a developer who has a funder involved who can deliver this scheme, which I think is very important, because we have had schemes across the city that have been before this committee which have yet to see any presence above ground level. So I'm very heartened to see a delivery commitment. The proposed public square will, in my opinion, because it also forms part of this phase one, is going to be a very important component in terms of drawing people through from Victoria Street and into the main body of the site. And clearly the developer, he's submitted a phasing plan as required by condition with this application, and there are real commitments to take this site forward. It's not an insignificant site. It's 3 hectares of land in the heart of the city centre, and as you know, it's sat in a state of semi-dereliction for some 30 years now. So I think what we have to be mindful of when looking at the whole package is what the developer has produced in its context, in the market conditions. And I think what is particularly heartening for me is the way that this will hopefully be a catalyst for the wider development of this site. So I think it would have been, I would have really appreciated, being case officer for this application, to have read some really positive comments about it. Unfortunately, we've not received that from third parties. That's a shame. It's an important scheme. It warrants public comment. We haven't had it, but there we go. And I would say to members tonight, Chair, that if you've got any concerns about any of the elements, then please revisit after this meeting all the analyses put forward by the developer and the rationale that they've provided, and also the response they've provided to people who have commented on this application. So therefore, Chair, I would promote the recommendation with the extra condition, and happy to take any further comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Yes, I agree with you, Lucy, that whilst it would be nice to have individual and exemplar buildings put on, but sometimes we have to look at where they're situated, what the developer can do, and as you said, we have to settle for what's acceptable. I believe Councillor Carr wants to come in next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's Councillor Carr. Yeah, I pick up on what Councillor Kerr and Mr. Woodhead said. We have had, because I sit on the Conservation Area Committee, as most of you know, and we had extensive debates, and I do think it's improved fairly dramatically over the course of the development of the design, and I agree with Ian. It's very important that we get on with this now. I personally would have preferred it to be 9, not 11, but we lost that argument in the debate, and I understand the reasons why. I think on the whole it is going to be a good development for the city, and we should move it on. One thing I noticed, Councillor Peggs mentioned something that I mentioned at Conservation Area, and it's gone away, so perhaps we could resurrect that. We ought to find, and I know it's somewhere, the old cap stones off the old Beckett well and try and incorporate them somehow into the public square. So if that could be done, I would be very grateful. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Chair, they're in the museum.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, thank you, Paul. We ought to look at a way of using those into the...
Right. Okay, Ian, would that be possible in any way, or can we sort of, ask them in any way, the developers, to do that?
Thank you, Chair. Bit of a curveball for me, but I'll do some. I'll have a few conversations beyond this meeting. It's not something I'd considered. So
Okay.
it's something that can be obviously carried forward, and I'll do that for you.
Okay, Ian, thank you very much.
Ian.
I think
Thank you.
the next speaker is Councillor Ross McChrystal.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'd just like to come in. Sorry, I've got my wife's phone ringing in the corner, so apologies for that. It will go off shortly. I just want to come in support of Mr. Woodhead's comments regarding this development. This development is a significant development for Derby City Centre. It's a mission critical development for Derby City. It's refreshing that we've got a developer at the table that submitted plans, that's got the finance to actually follow through on its submission to this committee. I think it's really, really important that this evening we tell the business community that Derby is open for business and we are open for regeneration, and we welcome this development full-heartedly.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. I think it's absolutely essential tonight that we're all positive. We recognise that this is going to be a huge development for the city centre, and it has our full and complete support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ross. Are you sure that wasn't your phone and not your wife's? Next speaker is Joanna.
Thanks, Chair. My phone certainly won't go off. I think really to follow on from words of Councillor Pegg and Councillor Carr, and I think Councillor McChrystal, though forgive me if I'm putting words into your mouth, Ross, about Beckett Well. The cap may well be in the museum, but the actual well was something that the Conservation Area Advisory Committee had talked about on a number of occasions. Joan Darcy, who we sadly lost last year, had made it a bit of a mission to try and find it. I'm fairly sure we can't condition the developers to find the well, but to put something into it, to put a little bit of a search into it, and also potentially something re the naming of the public square or something about Beckett Well. It was I think a 13th century well dedicated to Thomas Becket, so it does have sort of doctrinal importance, and it is a part of the history of the city. I think it's something that really does deserve to be noted, mentioned in whatever way the developers can do that. So like I say, I'm not sure what condition we can put on that, if any, but it would be really, really super if the developers acknowledge that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joanna. No, I'm not going to say all's well that ends well. Would anybody else like to come in?
No? Not after that, Chair.
If that's the case, would somebody like to move it to the vote?
Move to the vote, Chair.
Yeah.
Seconder?
Seconded.
Yeah, whichever one to do that.
Thank you. Over to you, Stephen.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor Bettany, please.
Thank you. I confirm my presence, and I've listened to the presentation and debate, and I vote in favour.
In favour, thank you, Councillor Bettany. Councillor Kerr, please.
Hi, I confirm my presence and have listened to the presentation and debate, and I vote in favour.
In favour, thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Carr, please.
I confirm my presence and have listened to the presentation and debate, and I vote in favour.
In favour, thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Hassel, please.
I confirm my presence and have listened to the presentation and debate, and I vote in favour.
In favour, thank you, Councillor Hassel. Councillor Nawaz, please.
I confirm my presence and have listened to the presentation and debate. I vote in favour.
In favour, thank you, Councillor Nawaz. Councillor McChrystal, please.
I confirm my presence and I listened to the presentation debate, and I vote in favour.
In favour, thank you, Councillor McChrystal. Councillor Pearce, please.
I confirm my presence and I've listened to the presentation and debate, and I vote in favour.
In favour. Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Councillor Paul Pegg, please.
I confirm my presence and I've listened to the presentation and debate, and I vote in favour.
In favour. Thank you, Councillor Pegg. Councillor West, please.
Thanks, Stephen. I confirm my presence and have listened to the presentation and debate. I vote in favour of the officer's recommendation.
In favour. Thank you, Councillor West. And finally, yourself, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, I confirm my presence and have listened to the presentation and debate, and I vote in favour.
In favour. Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous in favour.
Thank you, Stephen. That's passed. By the way, Lucy, I'd just like to say that was the most cheerful I've heard anybody when it comes to voting. Right, if that's all done, I'm moving on to item number 8, which is the most exciting part again, potential site visits. Who's going to tell us about that?
It's me, thank you, Chair. Ian Woodhead, Development Control Manager. Over to James on the PowerPoint, please. James?
Wake up, James.
Can you run through them, James, please?
He's fallen out with you, Ian.
Stores Road? It's right on the new bus depot. Babington Lane is also a scheme to include increase the height of the building, all visible from the public domain, of course. That one's been before committee fairly recently. You'll be au fait with that. That's a resubmission that Stephen Bates dealing with, all visible from the public zone.
Okay.
Thanks, James. Variation of condition. Thanks, James. That's work that we're doing on the park. Various works that have been subject to an EIA screening. That's all works that it's a Regulation 3 application, so it's our scheme. You could have a walk around the park when you're socially distanced and doing your hours exercise per day. Next one, please, James. That's remodeling the BMW showroom. If you want to go there, Chair, when you're buying your next car.
No, Jaguar for me.
Thank you, James. Cycle route. You could cycle along there, Councillor Kerr.
Walk along that road.
Not yet on my bicycle. I don't think they've built
No,
it.
you can't cycle it. I walk along there regularly with my dog. It's to be welcomed.
A future cycle route, Councillor Kerr.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Is that you, James? Oh, sorry. Castle Ward variation of condition. So you could just look at those details online. It's bits and pieces on the delivery of Castle Ward. And then that's a resubmission. You refused permission some time ago based on air quality grounds, and it's a resubmission with a building setback from the main frontage. You might want to have a look at that online. Julia's dealing with that application, and that's it.
Right. Thank you for that, Ian. By the way, did you say hour exercise or an hours? I mean, hours, yes, we've just done hours, but I don't know about an hours exercise. Thank you very much.
Your park running, Chair, that's all. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, then, Ian, thank you very much for that, and thank you all for attending tonight. And if I missed anybody out, Happy New Year, and let's hope it's not just a happy one, but a healthy one as well. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you all.